It was just a portrait of a mother and daughter, but it holds a secret that shocked historians. The archive room of the Atlanta History Center smells of old paper and preservation chemicals. Dr. Sarah Chen, a 42-year-old historian specializing in women in medicine, carefully examines photographs from the late 19th century. She's writing a book about African-American female physicians in the post-Reconstruction South, a subject with frustratingly few documented cases. Today, she's reviewing a collection donated by the estate of James Baldwin, a prominent black photographer who documented Atlanta's African-American community from 1890 to 1920. Most photographs show familiar scenes: church gatherings, family portraits, business owners, graduation ceremonies, important historical documents, but expected. Then she opens a folder marked Professional Portraits, 1895, and freezes. The photograph is remarkably preserved, formal and beautifully composed. Two black women pose in an elegant parlor. The older woman, perhaps 40, sits in an ornate chair with dignified posture. She wears a dark Victorian dress with fine details, her hair styled impeccably. Her expression is serene but penetrating, eyes that have seen much and reveal little. Standing beside her, one hand resting gently on the older woman's shoulder, is a younger woman of about 23. She's dressed in a lighter dress that speaks of education and refinement. Her face radiates intelligence, quiet determination, and something else, a carefully controlled intensity. What makes Sarah's heart race is the notation on the back, written in elegant script. Mrs. Josephine Carter and her daughter, Dr. Elizabeth Carter, Atlanta, Georgia, November 1895. Dr. Elizabeth Carter in 1895. Sarah's hands tremble. A black female physician in 1895 would be almost unheard of. This is only 30 years after the end of slavery, during the brutal consolidation of Jim Crow laws across the South. Medical schools barely existed for black students, let alone black women. She immediately searches her research database. After 20 minutes, she finds a reference. Elizabeth Carter graduated from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania in 1894, one of only 2 black women in her graduating class. But after graduation, nothing. No hospital affiliations, no private practice listings, no medical society records, no advertisements for services. Elizabeth Carter seems to have graduated from medical school and then vanished from official history entirely. Sarah photographs the portrait with her phone and examines every detail through a magnifying glass. The quality of their clothing indicates unusual economic stability for black women in 1895 Georgia. The formal parlor setting suggests this portrait was commissioned for a significant reason. Formal photography was expensive. She notices carefully placed details: medical textbooks on a side table, a framed diploma barely visible on the wall. Well, these aren't accidental. Baldwin was too skilled a photographer for careless composition. Something about this photograph doesn't fit the standard historical narrative. Sarah can feel it. That instinct developed over 2 decades of research that tells her when something important lies hidden beneath the surface. Tomorrow, she'll search census records, property documents, anything she can find about these 2 women. Tonight, she stares at their faces on her phone screen, studying their expressions, the way they're positioned, the intimacy of that hand on a shoulder. "Who were you, really?" she whispers to the image. Sarah arrives at the Georgia State Archives early, armed with coffee and growing certainty that the Carter women's story conceals something significant. She starts with the 1900 census, the earliest available after the photograph. Finding them takes 15 minutes. Josephine Carter, age 44, black widow, head of household, occupation listed as boarding house keeper. Address, 847 Auburn Avenue in Atlanta's 4th Ward, the heart of the city's black community. The household listing shows 5 boarders, all women, 2 teachers, 1 dressmaker, 1 laundress, 1 cook. Mixed economic classes, but all respectable occupations. And there's Elizabeth Carter, age 28, listed as daughter, occupation, physician. The census confirms their existence and Elizabeth's profession. But Sarah knows census records tell only partial truths, especially about black lives in the Jim Crow South. She searches birth records next, looking for Elizabeth Carter, born around 1872. Nothing in Georgia. She expands to surrounding states: Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, North Carolina. Still nothing. No birth certificate connects Elizabeth to Josephine anywhere. Sarah tries death records for Mr. Carter, Josephine's supposed deceased husband. She searches systematically through every year from 1870 to 1895, checking all variations of the name. No record of any Carter man married to Josephine dying in Georgia during those years. It's as if Josephine's husband never existed. Next, she searches medical directories and hospital records. In 1895, Atlanta, only 2 hospitals treated black patients: Grady Hospital's segregated colored ward and a small private infirmary run by black physicians. Neither lists Elizabeth Carter on staff, even as a consulting physician. She searches business directories. No listing for Dr. Elizabeth Carter or E. Carter physician anywhere in Atlanta from 1895 to 1920. Sarah moves to newspaper archives. combing through black-owned publications like the Atlanta Independent and the Savannah Tribune. Surely a black female physician would be newsworthy? A woman graduating from medical school would merit at least a mention? She finds nothing until June 1896, one small notice buried on page 4. The colored ladies of the 4th Ward express gratitude for medical services rendered during recent influenza outbreak. Particular thanks to the skilled care provided by our community's dedicated women. No names, just dedicated women, plural, anonymous. Sarah leans back in her chair, frustrated but intrigued. Elizabeth Carter graduated from a prestigious medical college in 1894, returned to Atlanta, posed for a formal portrait in 1895, boldly identifying herself as Dr. Elizabeth Carter, and then effectively vanished from every official record. But she didn't actually vanish. The census shows her living with Josephine continuously. The newspaper hint suggests medical work was happening. Someone was treating patients in the 4th Ward. Why no official practice? Sarah knows the historical answer. Black physicians in 1890s Georgia faced enormous barriers. White hospitals refused them privileges. Many white patients wouldn't see them. Even some black patients, conditioned by systemic racism, doubted their abilities. Medical societies denied membership. Female physicians faced additional obstacles everywhere, north and south. Laws restricted their practice. Social conventions deemed medicine inappropriate for women. Many male physicians refused to work with them. A black female physician in 1895 Georgia would face nearly insurmountable barriers to any official practice. Yet Elizabeth claimed that title proudly in her portrait. And someone was providing medical care to 4th Ward residents. Sarah has one more avenue to explore today: property records. She pulls the deed for 847 Auburn Avenue. The property was purchased in April 1893 by Josephine Carter, not by a husband. By Josephine herself as a single woman. She paid $800 cash, a substantial sum. Sarah spends the morning in newspaper archives, searching every mention of Josephine Carter's boarding house. The establishment appears frequently in the social pages of black newspapers throughout the 1890s and early 1900s. Mrs. Carter's boarding house hosts meetings of the Colored Women's Club, Sunday dinners for teachers from local black schools, small gatherings for church auxiliaries. Always respectable. Always women. Always described with one particular word that appears repeatedly: discreet. An 1897 article about Atlanta's black business community notes, Mrs. Josephine Carter maintains one of the most respectable establishments for colored professional women. Her house is known for its quiet dignity and her discretion in matters of her guests' privacy. Discretion. Privacy. The words appear again and again. Sarah searches for details about the boarders. Most stay only temporarily. Teachers on short-term assignments, women between employment, nurses training at the black infirmary, standard boarding house clientele. But occasionally there are cryptic references. A mention in 1899, Mrs. Carter's establishment continues to provide safe haven for women in distress. Another, in 1902, the charitable work done quietly at 847 Auburn Avenue deserves recognition from our community. Safe haven, charitable work done quietly. What kind of work? Then Sarah finds something that makes her pause. A death notice from 1898. Negro woman, age and name unknown, died of complications following childbirth. Burial arrangements made by Mrs. J. Carter. Interment in Oakland Cemetery colored section. No name for the deceased woman, just arrangements made by Mrs. Carter. Sarah searches more carefully and finds 3 similar notices over the following years. Women dying of female complaints or childbirth complications. All with arrangements made by Josephine Carter, all buried quietly with minimal identification. The pattern suggests something specific. In the 1890s, childbirth was dangerous, especially for poor women without access to medical care. Complications from pregnancy, miscarriages, illegal abortion attempts, these killed women regularly. Black women had almost no access to hospitals or professional medical care. Someone was trying to help them. Someone was providing care when no one else would, even when it came too late. Sarah shifts her research to the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania, requesting Elizabeth Carter's academic records. The college maintains excellent historical archives, and they email scanned documents within hours. Elizabeth's file is thin, but revealing. She graduated in 1894 with honors, particularly distinguished in obstetrics and gynecology. Her senior thesis, Maternal Mortality Among Negro Women, Preventable Causes and Medical Interventions. A letter from her supervising professor, Dr. Anna Wilson, notes, Miss Carter possesses exceptional surgical skills and diagnostic acuity. She is deeply committed to serving her community. I fear greatly that the obstacles she will face as a Negro woman physician will prevent her from practicing to her full potential. This represents a tremendous loss to the field of medicine and to the patients who desperately need her skills. The professor's fear was justified. Officially, Elizabeth never practiced. But unofficially, Sarah finds one more document. A letter from Elizabeth to Dr. Wilson, dated March 1895, written shortly after her return to Atlanta. Dear Dr. Wilson, I have returned to Atlanta and find the situation precisely as we discussed and as I expected. No hospital will grant me privileges. The Medical Society refuses my membership application. My race and sex present insurmountable barriers to official practice. However, I am not deterred. There are women in my community who desperately need medical care, who have nowhere else to turn, who are dying from preventable conditions. I will serve them however I can, through whatever means become available. My mother has secured us a suitable location. I ask only for your continued discretion. Yours faithfully in medicine, Elizabeth Carter. My mother has secured us a suitable location. Sarah reads the sentence 3 times. Something about the phrasing bothers her. Formal, distant. Sarah returns to the census records, this time looking more carefully at the details she initially skimmed. Josephine Carter, born approximately 1856 in South Carolina. Elizabeth Carter, born approximately 1872. Location listed as unknown. 16 years between them. Possible for mother and daughter, though young. But there's no birth record connecting them. No documented family relationship anywhere in any archive. Sarah searches for Josephine's background. She finds a mention in a Charleston, South Carolina newspaper from 1875, in a list of household servants. Josephine, Negro, age approximately 19, employed as nurse to the Wilkinson family household. Josephine was born into slavery around 1856, freed at age 9 when the Civil War ended in 1865. By 1875, she was working as a domestic nurse in Charleston. Sarah traces Josephine's movements. She appears in Charleston city directories as a domestic worker through 1890. Then nothing until she appears in Atlanta in 1893, purchasing property. 11 years of domestic service, then suddenly she has $800 cash to buy property. Sarah searches for any connection between Josephine and Elizabeth's family. Nothing. She searches for Elizabeth's parents, any Carter family that might have had a daughter born around 1872. Nothing connects. These 2 women appeared together in Atlanta in the early 1890s with no documented prior relationship, purchased a house, established a boarding house, and presented themselves publicly as mother and daughter. Sarah pulls up the photograph again on her laptop, studying it with new understanding. She examines their body language, their positioning, the way the younger woman's hand rests on the older woman's shoulder. She's examined thousands of historical mother-daughter portraits. The dynamics are usually clear: hierarchical positioning, physical distance maintained, or conversely casual intimacy that comes from lifelong familiarity. This photograph shows something different. They stand as equals. The touch is gentle but deliberate. They look at the camera with similar expressions. Guarded, dignified, united. Sarah thinks about the language in Elizabeth's letter. My mother has secured us a suitable location. Not mother or mama, but my mother. Formal. Almost like describing someone in the third person. She thinks about Josephine buying property in her own name as a single woman. Unusual, but not impossible for the era. She thinks about the boarding house that only housed women, that was known for discretion, that provided safe haven. She thinks about Elizabeth's complete absence from official medical practice records, despite obvious medical work being done. She thinks about them living together continuously for over 20 years, from their 20s and 40s until both died in 1917 1918. A possibility begins to form in Sarah's mind, one that would explain everything. 2 women, unrelated by blood, living together as mother and daughter to hide the true nature of their relationship. It wasn't uncommon. Sarah has researched enough queer history to know that women throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries used familial relationships as cover. Cousins, sharing a home, aunts, raising nieces, sisters, living together. The Boston marriage phenomenon in the North. But in the South, among black women, during Jim Crow, Sarah needs expert consultation. She calls Dr. Patricia Moore, a colleague at Spelman College who specializes in African American LGBTQ history. Patricia, I need your perspective on something sensitive, Sarah says when they meet that afternoon. She shows Patricia everything: the photographs, the missing records, the formal language, the coded newspaper references, the all-female boarding house. Patricia studies the materials carefully, then looks up with knowing eyes. They were a couple, she says quietly. Josephine and Elizabeth, not mother and daughter, partners. Sarah feels validation mixed with sadness. How do I prove it? You probably can't definitively. That's precisely why they hid it so carefully. Patricia traces the photograph's outline with her finger. In 1895, black women had virtually no power, no legal protection. Being queer on top of that, they would have been completely vulnerable to violence, to being institutionalized, to losing everything. So they created a cover story that society could accept: respectable widow and her educated daughter. The boarding house was a front. Partially. It provided legitimate income and social respectability. But more importantly, it gave them a plausible reason to have women constantly coming and going at all hours. Perfect cover for clandestine medical practice. Following Patricia's advice, Sarah contacts the First Congregational Church, where records indicate Josephine and Elizabeth attended services. The church historian, an elderly man named Robert Jefferson, meets her in the church basement archive. "The Carter women," he says, nodding recognition. "My grandmother knew them well, spoke of them with tremendous respect." "What did she say about their relationship?" Sarah asks carefully. Mr. Jefferson looks at her shrewdly. "My grandmother said Mrs. Carter and Dr. Elizabeth were devoted to each other." That was her exact phrase, devoted. She also said Dr. Elizabeth saved her own mother's life during a difficult childbirth in 1897. No hospital would accept her mother. She was black and poor. Dr. Elizabeth came in the night, delivered the baby safely, stayed 3 days until the fever broke. He pulls out a church ledger from 1895. They joined together in October 1895, listed as Mrs. Josephine Carter and daughter Elizabeth Carter. But look here. He points to a marginal notation in different handwriting. Benefactors, Women's Charitable Fund. They donated money. Generously and regularly for 20 years, the church maintained a discreet fund to assist women in desperate circumstances. Food, shelter, medical care. The Carters were major contributors. He shows Sarah pages of recorded donations from 1895 through 1915. "Mr. Jefferson, what happened to them?" Dr. Elizabeth died in 1917 during the influenza pandemic. She was treating patients and contracted it herself. Mrs. Josephine died 6 months later. My grandmother said she died of heartbreak, couldn't survive without Elizabeth. He closes the ledger. They're buried together at Oakland Cemetery, same plot. The headstone says Josephine Carter, 1856, 1918, and Elizabeth Carter, 1872, 1917, beloved physician. Together in death as they were in life. Sarah feels tears forming. Did people know about their relationship? Everyone who mattered knew, Mr. Jefferson says gently. They protected the Carters through silence because they loved them. Those two women saved countless lives, asked nothing for themselves, lived with dignity despite impossible circumstances. The community honored that, through protection and discretion. Sarah thanks him and drives directly to Oakland Cemetery. She finds the grave easily, a simple but well-maintained headstone under an oak tree in the colored section. Standing there, Sarah reads the inscription she'd missed in her initial research. Devoted to each other and to serving their community. Devoted to each other. The code was hidden in plain sight. Later, Sarah searches for more evidence of their network. If they ran a secret medical practice, they needed help, referrals, assistance, protection. She finds references to 3 women who appear repeatedly in connection with Josephine Carter. Clara Bennett, a midwife, Ruth Washington, a nurse, and Mary Douglas, who owned a laundry service. All 3 lived within 2 blocks of the boarding house. All 3 attended the same church. All participated in the Women's Charitable Fund. They were the network. Midwives, referring complicated cases, nurses assisting with procedures, the laundry providing cover for women's visits to the boarding house. Sarah discovers that Ruth Washington's great-granddaughter, Evelyn Washington Price, still lives in Atlanta. She contacts her. Evelyn invites Sarah to her home and brings out a carefully preserved leather journal. My great-grandmother's diary. She worked with Dr. Elizabeth Carter for over 20 years. She opens to an entry from January 1896. Assisted Mrs. C's establishment tonight. Case of severe hemorrhage after failed termination attempt. Dr. C worked 4 hours to save the woman's life. Successful, thank God. I deeply admire Dr. C's skill and courage. She risks everything to help our women who have nowhere else to turn. Another entry, March 1900. Had tea with Mrs. C and Dr. C today, celebrating their 7th year together. Mrs. C made a beautiful cake. Watching them, one sees true partnership, true love, though they can never speak it openly. Those of us who truly know them see it clearly. They have built a life of profound meaning and service together. Evelyn closes the diary gently. My great-grandmother understood their relationship and protected them. She never explicitly said they were lovers, but she documented their devotion. Why share this with me now? Because it's time. Everyone involved is gone, but their story, what they accomplished, how they loved, how they served, deserves to be remembered and honored. Sarah returns to James Baldwin's archive, this time examining his personal papers held at the Baltimore Museum of Art. They send her digitized copies of his journals. In an entry from November 1895, Baldwin wrote, "Photographed Mrs. Carter and Dr. Carter today, 2 of the finest women I have had the honor to know. They do important work in the city, work that can never be publicly acknowledged. I provide them this documentation as both protection and record. If questions arise about their household arrangement, this portrait establishes their public story. But those who truly understand will see what is really present. 2 souls united in purpose and in love." Sarah reads it 3 times. Baldwin knew. He deliberately created documentation serving two purposes: public cover story and truthful record for those who could read between the lines. She finds similar entries about other women. Baldwin was creating an archive of Atlanta's hidden queer black community, documenting lives that couldn't be openly acknowledged. Sarah examines Baldwin's full portfolio again. She finds dozens of portraits of women, many in pairs, with similar composition to the Carter photograph. Teachers with books, nurses with medical supplies, businesswomen with ledgers. Many pairs posed intimately labeled as sisters, cousins, or roommates. Baldwin was documenting an entire hidden community living double lives under Jim Crow. Sarah then finds evidence of how dangerous this was. In March 1901, Josephine was arrested on charges of running a disorderly house. The arrest report: neighbors complained about women of questionable character visiting at all hours. The court records show the charges were dismissed after 3 prominent black community members testified to the respectable nature of Mrs. Carter's establishment. But Elizabeth's name doesn't appear anywhere in the arrest records. The community protected the doctor by keeping her invisible. Sarah finds a letter from their attorney to Josephine after the trial. "I urge extreme caution going forward. There are forces seeking any excuse to harass our people, particularly those engaged in work challenging the established order. You and your daughter do vital work, but you must exercise greater discretion. Fewer nighttime visits, more care about who comes and goes." The message was clear. They had come dangerously close to exposure. Sarah finds evidence they became more careful after 1901. Newspaper mentions decrease. Social gatherings stopped being publicized. They went deeper underground. But the medical work continued. Ruth Washington's diary confirms Elizabeth kept practicing, kept saving lives, just with more elaborate precautions. Sarah also discovers the personal cost. Church records from 1905 note, "Mrs. Carter requests prayers for health and strength. She suffers from unnamed ailments." Another note from 1908. "Doctor, Carter requests prayers for her mother's recovery from nervous exhaustion." The strain of living hidden lives while doing dangerous work under constant threat was breaking them. Yet they persisted for 17 more years after that arrest, continuing their partnership, their work, their love, despite everything. Sarah sits with the weight of what she's discovered. These weren't just romantic partners hiding their relationship. They were medical professionals, serving a desperate community while navigating racism, sexism, homophobia, and constant threat of violence. Every single day they chose to continue. That's not just love, that's extraordinary courage. The photograph that started Sarah's investigation now means something entirely different. Not a simple family portrait, but evidence of resistance, service, and love that defied every barrier society erected against them. 2 black women in 1895, Jim Crow, Georgia, building a life together, running a secret medical practice, saving lives no one else would save, and documenting it all in a photograph labeled Mother and Daughter, hidden in plain sight for 130 years, waiting for someone to see the truth. Sarah's research reaches 1917, the year Elizabeth died. The influenza pandemic that would kill millions hit Atlanta hard, devastating the black community. She finds Elizabeth's name finally appearing in official medical records, on death certificates. Between September and November 1917, Elizabeth Carter, MD, is listed as attending physician on 14 death certificates for black patients who died of influenza. It's the only official documentation of her medical practice in her entire career. The pandemic was so overwhelming that authorities stopped caring who provided care, as long as someone did. Sarah finds a desperate article in the Atlanta Independent from October 1917. "The influenza scourge continues claiming our people. Grady Hospital's colored ward is overwhelmed. We have lost doctors, nurses, and countless patients. We urgently call upon anyone with medical training to assist. Our community faces devastation without more help." Elizabeth would have read that. After 22 years of practicing in secret, she stepped forward publicly. Ruth Washington's diary entry from September 28, 1917. "Dr. C has gone to Grady Hospital to volunteer. Mrs. C begged her not to go. The infection risk is terrible, but Dr. C said she took an oath to help people, and this is when she's most needed. She said 22 years of hiding was enough. She's going to practice medicine openly, even if only during this crisis. I admire her immense courage, but fear for her life." Elizabeth worked at Grady Hospital for 6 weeks, treating influenza patients 18-hour days in the overwhelmed colored ward. Many medical workers died. Elizabeth contracted influenza on November 12, 1917. Ruth Washington's diary: "Dr. C has fallen ill with high fever. Mrs. C is beside herself with fear. She tends to Dr. C constantly, barely sleeping. Dr. C insists Mrs. C maintain distance to avoid infection, but Mrs. C refuses to leave her side. I've been beside her for 23 years, Mrs. C said. I won't leave her now." Elizabeth died November 18, 1917, age 45. Her death certificate lists occupation as physician and notes she had been treating influenza patients at Grady Hospital. Finally, officially, she was recognized as what she had always been, a doctor. The funeral was held at First Congregational Church. The Atlanta Independent announcement, Dr. Elizabeth Carter, beloved physician of our community, succumbed to influenza November 18th. Dr. Carter served the colored women of Atlanta for over 20 years, providing medical care to those who had nowhere else to turn. She sacrificed her life caring for others during this terrible pandemic. Survived by her mother, Mrs. Josephine Carter. Over 300 people attended. The church overflowed. All those women Elizabeth had helped over the years came to honor her. The pastor's eulogy, preserved in church records. Dr. Carter was a light in darkness, a healer who asked nothing for herself, who gave everything for others. She could not practice openly, yet she never stopped being a physician. She exemplified medicine's highest calling, serving those in need, regardless of personal cost. Sarah finds a handwritten note from Josephine in the church registry. My Elizabeth is gone. 23 years we shared, years of work and love and purpose. She was the finest person I have ever known. The world never fully knew her, never fully valued her, but I knew her, God knew her. The women she saved knew her. That will have to be enough. Josephine died 6 months later, May 1918. The death certificate lists heart failure, but Ruth Washington's diary tells the real story. Mrs. C is gone. She simply gave up after Dr. C died. Stopped eating, stopped living. She said there was no point without Elizabeth. They were buried together in Oakland Cemetery, in a plot Josephine had purchased years earlier, one headstone for both. Sarah visits the grave again, understanding its full meaning now. Partners planning to rest together eternally. The inscription, devoted to each other and to serving their community. Code and truth simultaneously. Sarah compiles everything. Photographs, documents, diary entries, church records, oral histories. The evidence is overwhelming. Josephine and Elizabeth were partners who ran a secret medical practice serving black women in Jim Crow Atlanta for over 20 years. She writes her findings for the Journal of African American History. She's careful, academic, but doesn't hide the truth. These women were almost certainly in a romantic relationship, and their mother-daughter arrangement was protective cover. Before submitting, she contacts descendants and community members. She places ads in Atlanta newspapers and genealogy websites, seeking information about Dr. Elizabeth Carter and Mrs. Josephine Carter. Atlanta, 1895-1918. She receives multiple responses, including one from Jordan Matthews in Seattle. I'm Josephine Carter's great-great-nephew. Family said she died childless, but I have a trunk of her belongings that's been in our attic for generations. No one ever opened it. She wanted it kept private. Your research made me curious. Can we talk? Sarah flies to Seattle immediately. Jordan leads her to his garage where an old steamer trunk sits covered in dust. This belonged to Josephine. After she died, it was sent to her sister in South Carolina. The sister kept it sealed, said Josephine wanted privacy. It's passed down with those instructions. Keep it private. Why open it now? Everyone who could be hurt is gone. And your research suggests they did important work worth remembering, not hiding. They opened the trunk together. Inside, letters, journals, photographs, medical notes. A treasure trove. Josephine's journals span 1893 to 1918. Sarah reads with shaking hands. October 3rd, 1893. Met Elizabeth today at the Medical College in Philadelphia. She is brilliant, determined, beautiful. She spoke of her dream to serve her people as a physician. I told her of Atlanta, of the need there. We talked for hours. I felt something I've never felt before. March 12th, 1894. Elizabeth graduated today, top of her class. I'm so proud. She's decided to come to Atlanta with me. We'll start a life together. People may suspect, but we'll be careful. We'll call ourselves mother and daughter. Our age difference makes it believable. This way we can be together, and she can practice medicine however possible. November 10th, 1895. Had our portrait taken today by Mr. Baldwin. It's risky, documenting ourselves, but Elizabeth insisted. She said if anything happens to us, she wants proof we existed, that we loved each other, that we did good work. Mr. Baldwin understands. He made us look dignified. 2 women building a life together. Entry after entry documents their life. Patients helped, close calls with authorities, a joy found in work and each other, constant fear. One entry from 1905. Some days I'm exhausted from hiding. Tired of pretending Elizabeth is my daughter instead of my partner, my love, my everything. But this is how we survive. This is how she practices medicine. This is how we serve our community. The hiding is the price we pay. Another from 1912. 20 years together today. 2 decades of shared life, shared work, shared love. We've saved so many lives. We've built something meaningful despite every barrier. I'm grateful for every day with her. The final entry, November 20th, 1917, 2 days after Elizabeth died. She's gone. My Elizabeth is gone. 23 years together. I don't know how to exist without her. She was my purpose, my joy, my heart. The world took everything from us, forced us to hide, to pretend, to live half lives. But they couldn't take our love. That was ours. That was real. I'll join her soon. Sarah reads through tears. This is the evidence that changes everything. Proof not just of their relationship, but of their profound love and commitment. Jordan is crying too. I never knew. My family never told us. They were protecting them, Sarah says. Even after death, the family kept the secret. Can you tell their story now? Yes, it's time. Sarah's article is published in the Journal of African American History. The response is immediate and overwhelming. Major newspapers pick up the story. Hidden history, black female doctor and her partner. Ran secret medical practice in Jim Crow Atlanta. The 1895 photograph appears everywhere. Two dignified black women labeled mother and daughter, hiding their truth in plain sight for 130 years. Social media explodes with shares and discussions. People are moved, inspired, challenged. Conversations emerge about racism, sexism, homophobia, medical access, and the courage required to resist intersecting oppressions. Some criticism surfaces. Why focus on their relationship rather than their medical work? Sarah addresses this directly in interviews. Their relationship is inseparable from their work. They could only do that work together, protected by their cover story. Their love enabled their service. Both matter. Others ask, do we have definitive proof they were lovers? Sarah responds, we have Josephine's journals explicitly stating their love. We have 23 years of living together. We have their burial together. The evidence is clear. The black LGBTQ community particularly embraces the story. For many, it's revelation that their history extends deeper than they knew, that even in the darkest periods, queer black people existed, loved, resisted, and served. Sarah works with community organizations to establish the Carter Foundation, named for both women. The foundation provides scholarships for LGBTQ students of color pursuing medicine and funds free medical clinics serving marginalized communities. The National Museum of African American History and Culture requests the 1895 photograph for permanent display. It's placed in the section on black women's resistance with full explanation of Josephine and Elizabeth's story. The house at 847 Auburn Avenue, long abandoned, is purchased by the foundation and restored. It becomes a museum and community health center, teaching visitors about the Carter's work while providing modern medical services to underserved populations. Sarah gives talks at medical schools, history conferences, LGBTQ organizations. She emphasizes the same themes: courage, service, love, resistance against impossible odds. At Spelman College, she tells students, Josephine and Elizabeth couldn't practice medicine openly, they couldn't love openly, they couldn't exist as their full selves, yet they built a life of profound meaning and service. They saved hundreds of lives. They loved each other deeply for 23 years. They resisted every system that tried to erase them. At a medical school in Philadelphia, Elizabeth's alma mater, Sarah addresses future doctors. Elizabeth Carter took the same oath you'll take, but she was denied the right to practice because of her race and gender. So she practiced anyway, secretly, for over 2 decades. She represents medicine's highest ideal, serving those in need regardless of personal cost. Her story should inspire you to ask, who still lacks access to care today? How can you serve them? Descendants of women. Elizabeth treated come forward with stories passed down through generations. Dr. Elizabeth saved my great-grandmother during childbirth. She treated my grandmother when no hospital would see her. She gave us medicine when we couldn't pay. The stories multiply, dozens of families whose existence traces back to Elizabeth's secret practice. Sarah tracks down more of Baldwin's portraits from his hidden archive. She finds 37 similar photographs of black queer women living as relatives in Atlanta between 1890 and 1920. She publishes a book, Hidden Lives, Black Queer Women in Jim Crow Atlanta. The book becomes required reading in African American history and LGBTQ studies courses nationwide. 3 years after Sarah's initial discovery, a ceremony is held at Oakland Cemetery. The Carter grave receives a new, larger monument funded by the foundation. The inscription now reads, Josephine Carter, 1856 to 1918, and Dr. Elizabeth Carter, 1872-1917, partners in life, love, and service. They ran a secret medical practice, serving black women in Atlanta for over 20 years, saving countless lives while living courageously as themselves, despite all barriers, devoted to each other and to their community. Over 200 people attend the dedication ceremony, descendants of their patients, LGBTQ activists, medical professionals, historians, community members. Sarah speaks, for 130 years, Josephine and Elizabeth's truth was hidden. They lived and loved and worked in secret, protected by a community that understood their value. Today, we honor them publicly. We say their names. We tell their truth. We celebrate their courage, their love, and their service. The crowd is silent, emotional. They couldn't live openly, Sarah continues, but we can honor them openly. We can learn from them, and we can continue their work, serving those who lack access, loving across barriers, resisting systems of oppression. She pauses. Josephine and Elizabeth, your story is finally told. Your love is finally acknowledged. Your work is finally recognized. Thank you for everything you gave. We will remember. 5 years after Sarah's discovery, a young medical student named Maya Johnson contacts her. Maya is black, queer, and beginning her clinical rotations. She's read Sarah's book and researched the Carters extensively. Their story changed my life, Maya tells Sarah over coffee. I'm from Atlanta. I'm studying to be an OB/GYN, reading about doctor. Elizabeth showed me that black queer women have always been healers, have always served our communities, even when the world tried to stop us. Maya shows Sarah her medical school application essay, written about the Carters. I wrote about how Elizabeth practiced medicine for 20 years without official recognition, and how that reflects ongoing barriers black women face in medicine. I wrote about how she and Josephine loved each other despite laws and society telling them their love was impossible. Their courage inspires mine. Sarah feels tears forming. This is why she did this work, so young people like Maya could see themselves in history, could draw strength from ancestors who survived and resisted. I'm doing my residency at Grady Hospital, Maya continues, the same hospital where Dr. Elizabeth worked during the pandemic. Every day I walk those halls, I think about her. I think about how she finally got to practice openly, even briefly, even at the cost of her life. What will you do after residency? Open a practice serving low-income women, especially black women and LGBTQ women, like Elizabeth did, but openly this time. I'll put her name on my wall, in honor of Dr. Elizabeth Carter, who showed us the way. Sarah grips Maya's hand. She would be so proud. They both would. Later, Sarah visits 847 Auburn Avenue, now the Carter Community Health Center. The building has been beautifully restored while maintaining its historical character. The parlor where the 1895 photograph was taken is preserved as a museum room, with the photograph displayed prominently. But the rest of the building functions as a modern clinic, providing free and low-cost medical care to women who lack access, continuing Elizabeth's work 130 years later. Sarah watches patients come and go. Young women, old women, black women, white women, Latina women, trans women. Everyone served with dignity, just as Elizabeth served her patients secretly all those years ago. The clinic director, a black lesbian physician named Dr. Tamara Brooks, gives Sarah a tour. We've served over 3,000 patients in the past 3 years, Dr. Brooks says proudly. OB/GYN care, primary care, mental health services, everything, doctor. Elizabeth would have provided if she could have practiced openly. They stand in the museum room, looking at the 1895 photograph of Josephine and Elizabeth. Do you think they knew? Dr. Brooks asks quietly, that their story would eventually be told? That their work would continue? I think they hoped, Sarah says. Josephine's journal said Elizabeth insisted on taking this photograph as proof they existed, that they loved each other, that they did good work. She wanted evidence, even knowing it was dangerous. She was thinking about the future, about people like us eventually finding them. Then we're fulfilling her wish. Yes, and exceeding it. They had to hide. We get to honor them openly. Sarah receives an email on her phone, a message from a woman in California who just discovered her great-great-grandmother was treated by Elizabeth in 1905. Another story, another life saved, another connection revealed. The stories keep coming, even now. The network of women Elizabeth helped, and the descendants of those women, continues to expand as people research their family histories and find references to the kind doctor on Auburn Avenue who helped us. Sarah thinks about the journey that began with one photograph, a portrait that seemed to be simply a mother and daughter, but held layers of hidden truth. 2 black women in 1895 Georgia who built an extraordinary life together despite every barrier society erected, racial, gender, sexual. They couldn't be themselves openly. They couldn't marry. They couldn't practice medicine officially. They lived under constant threat of violence and exposure. But they loved each other. They served their community. They saved hundreds of lives. And they documented their existence, trusting that someday someone would understand and tell their truth. That trust was justified. Their photograph hangs not just in the Smithsonian, but in medical schools, in LGBTQ community centers, in Black history museums across the country. Their names are spoken with honor, their love is celebrated, their work is continued. Sarah returns to the cemetery one final time, standing before their shared grave. The new monument reflects the afternoon sun. "You're remembered," she tells them. "Your love, your work, your courage, all of it is remembered and honored. You don't have to hide anymore." A breeze moves through the oak tree above the grave, leaves rustling like whispers from the past. Sarah likes to think it's Josephine and Elizabeth, finally at peace, knowing their story has been told. Two women who loved each other across 23 years, who served their community for 2 decades, who lived with extraordinary courage in impossible times, hidden in plain sight for 130 years. Finally, triumphantly remembered.